Welcome back to Football Weather. Galen, Clavio, Matt Blaszka joining you. It is Monday, September 22nd in the evening. We are through the most recent week of college football, and man, do we have a lot to talk about. It was not a weekend of a lot of high-level matchups, but it was a weekend of a lot of interesting results, and it sets up a week coming up that's going to be quite fascinating for a variety of levels. We're finally starting to get a clear picture of who's good and who's not good in college football. And I'm excited to see where things go. Matt, how are you doing? Good to see you on this lovely one Monday.
Yeah, happy officially fall as we crossed that summer to fall line.
You had to remind me of that, didn't you?
Yeah, with football weather, we talk about, weather and all that times a year. No, it's great to be back. I listened to the episode yesterday on Crimson Cast, and certainly that was a really cathartic day for a lot of folks listening to people on that pod. It was really awesome to see. But also, I was at the game on Saturday, but also it was really nice. Listen, I'm not used to it. You're probably used to this, but hearing from folks who listen to the show. So thank you for those who have tuned in so far. It's been we're still in the early ride here, but it's been so far so good.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. We've enjoyed working together on this. Obviously, it was Matt's idea. It's really gotten me a lot more engaged in college football, which is great. I need that, especially since IU is good, and and Miami's good. So it's one of those things where we always appreciate you folks listening in or watching, and we hope to add more folks to the mix as we move forward. So yeah, stop by, say hi if you see us out in public. We certainly enjoy it. We got a lot to talk about on this show, but first of all, just wanted to remind all of you that we are brought to you here on the Back Home Network by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. We both went hoodie, despite it being pretty warm outside.
It's really humid out.
This is really we're dressing up for the show here.
Yeah.
But whether you would like a nice Miami hoodie or the 68 Rose Bowl hoodie or anything else from any one of the hundreds of other schools that Home Field has in their repertoire, it's the place to go. Whether you're shopping in person at Home Field at Tracks here at Kirkwood Avenue in Bloomington, Indiana, or whether you're shopping at homefieldapparel.com, they got you covered, whatever it is, folks. And we are happy to let you know that, the college football kickoff tour is continuing, brought to you by Modelo. They were in Bloomington this past week. We did a live podcast, myself, Rhett Lewis, down at Home Field at Tracks. They had a bunch of great activations, including a pop-up store for IU. They're going to be maybe in your neck of the woods coming up soon if you're following college football in other locations. You can use the code HOME23, HOME23, and get 15% off your first order. So go do that if you haven't yet. Again, homefieldapparel.com, proud sponsor of the Back Home Network. Also, just a reminder, follow us on YouTube, follow us on the Spotify account. We'd love to add to our subscriber numbers as we move through things. And we've enjoyed getting to meet some of you folks. We've enjoyed the comments that you've left on the podcast. Please keep those coming. We love to see that. Matt's been great about going in and responding. I've been less great about going in and responding. I'll get better, I promise. But we'd love to hear from you folks as we move forward with things. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. We got a lot to talk about on the show today. Big Ten, looking deep. We got some issues in Madison. We've got some issues in Clemson, and we're going to talk about that. We had some polling issues that continue to rear their ugly head, but it's just kind of how things are going in college football right now. We'll have our own merit poll update, which was a lot closer than both Matt or I thought it was going to be because we submit these things blind to each other. And then we'll preview what went on in week 5. We'll start off, though, by talking about what happened in week 4, some of the key results and matchups. And, obviously we got to start in Bloomington because that was the biggest ranked matchup of the week. It was a game both of us attended. Matt, we haven't had a chance to really talk about it since it happened. But, man, you want to talk about a game. I picked Indiana by 13 in this game. They were hosting the number 9 team in the country. I think almost every national expert except for Pat McAfee picked Illinois.
Right.
And Indiana won 63-10 in this game. This exceeded not just my wildest expectations, but I think any IU fan who was being serious, even if you thought Indiana was a couple of touchdowns better, that was probably it. 53-point victory against a team that had been ranked consistently in the top 10 pretty much since week 2 was a huge surprise.
Yeah, and it was incredible to watch in person, just the absolute beatdown it was. Every play just seemed choreographed, orchestrated to perfection, including that block, right? The block punt to start the scoring. There's only one scary moment was the broken covers that made it 7-7. But from that point forward, it just seemed like we were watching two different teams. It almost felt like an FCS scene. And this is nothing against Illinois. I think they are still probably pretty good. But Indiana looked like they had a point to prove the entire night. Mendoza was great. I mean, and there was 2 drop touchdowns. I think Scott mentioned this. It could have been a little bit worse. But it definitely seems like Indiana is backing up last year. They're better than last year. And this was a big night in Bloomington. And now they got to back it up, and I'm sure we'll talk about that here at the end of the show. They have Iowa and then Oregon and down the road. And, you don't want to get too far on the road, but starting 4-0 and, the topic to start is the Big Ten looks deep. Indiana, we need to see this from Indiana after, all the scheduling issues last year that were created from the national media. Winning this game is important from a national perception, not only for what happened last year, but now, hey, yes, last year was great. We were blowing teams out and they had all those 2-score victories, but now they've done it against a top 10 team at home. And it was a thorough beatdown of that top 10 team. And I have it as the second best win of the season. It was incredible to watch in person.
Yeah, and I mean, you could make an argument it might be the best win. It's just like the Georgia win at Tennessee, which I'm assuming is your number 1 win on the year on the road, but obviously by a 3-point margin in overtime as opposed to a 53-point margin. And the game was essentially over at the end of the third quarter.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it was a great exhibition of football from Indiana. It's funny. I listened to a bunch of the national podcasts and they're all like, Cignetti's a psychopath. Cignetti is like just wants to crush teams. I actually push back on that a little. I just think Cignetti is so much like Saban is so hyper-focused on execution and he drills that into his team. And like there is no off switch with Indiana. And we saw this last year against Nebraska. We saw it against UCLA. We saw it against Purdue. They're not going to let up just because they're up by a bunch. And I think it's wise for 2 reasons. A, you just never can tell in college sports. We've seen big comebacks. We've seen teams once they get back into it. But also, and this was a point that Joel Klatt made on his show this week, and I think a couple of other people I heard it on other ends, but Joel Klatt was the one I listened to most recently. Cignetti was really angry at the way that IU was portrayed in the national media narrative, not just during the season last year, but after the Notre Dame game. Like they were not serious. They were not an actual contender. They shouldn't have been in the playoff, all of that. And I think he realizes, A, they have got to almost overemphasize their superiority in games. And they can't afford at any point to give anybody any ammunition to say Indiana's not a top-level football team. And so, it's, as you said, they've got a really tough road ahead. They've got at Iowa. They've got at Oregon. They got at Penn State later. They're at Maryland, which suddenly looks like it might be a game that could be tricky. If I'm UCLA or Michigan State or Wisconsin and you got to go to Bloomington, I'm like, what are we going to do here? But it is going to be fascinating watching this team because this seems like a team and a coaching staff on a mission to not just prove the doubters wrong, but to really like solidify in the minds of people across the country that they belong in the discussion. And I think what was fascinating to me, Matt, is how many people across the country were like, okay, we were wrong. Indiana's actually a good team. I think I heard that from almost everybody this week. I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I listened into a bunch of. I'm like you. I'm a college football junkie. But when Indiana gets mentioned, you're like, okay, it's usually about the scheduling. That's how it's been since January or whatever whenever the game was, December. And now that all day, Joe Klatt talked about it, Andy Staples talked about it, everyone talked about it today. Oh, we were wrong about Indiana, and I have my hesitation, and maybe you didn't as much. I think I actually picked them to lose this game, and that was more of just. It's always hard to back up a really great story, and it's not. And it's not that I didn't believe that they could do it again. It's just really hard to do it again after having that breakout year. And this erased all doubts for me. Being here and being in India, being in Bloomington, it was certainly something to see. But now we know the capabilities of this team. I am really curious. I know Iowa's a big game, and I don't want to poo-poo that at all. But I'm really interested to now really see this Oregon matchup in a couple weeks, and really interested to see this Penn State matchup, because I really want to see what they have come from that Notre Dame and Ohio State game 1 year ago to where that now puts them in. The two of the top 5 programs in the last 10 years in the Big Ten. I know Oregon was the Pac-12, but the two of the better programs in the conference.
Let's move on to some of the other ranked matchups from this past week. Another big surprise, albeit this one on the road: Texas Tech 34, Utah 10. Utah was riding high. They were looked upon as a team that was, maybe a clear competitor for the college football playoff. Texas Tech had beaten up on their opponents, but they'd all been real bad. This one came out of nowhere. It was a turnover fest early, and then Texas Tech scores 24 points in the fourth quarter and puts it away, essentially. This was a game where Texas Tech did all of this despite the fact that they didn't have great statistical output from some of their top players. I think they only got 167 yards out of their passing game in this game, but it was a game that Texas Tech clearly demonstrated they belong in the national landscape as well. 4-0 on the season, and it was against what is a legitimately good Utah team from a statistical perspective. This is not a fluke Utah team.
Yeah, this is the big noon, Big 10 a.m. game, as we said earlier in the last episode. Early on, I watched a lot of this first half, and it was certainly if ugly is one word, as was one way to put it. But once Texas Tech got going, it obviously came in the fourth quarter. Utah really couldn't do very much. Texas Tech just looked like the better team in the trenches, which if you're going to win in January and December, you need to have that. And everyone keeps talking about Texas Tech being that SEC built squad, buying players and, being the Big 12 standard bearer. I think they separate themselves a bit here. I think you and we talked about this last week. These two teams were in our top 3, maybe not on the beginning of the season, but certainly was trending that way. Texas Tech looks like the clear Big 12 favorite now. And, we'll see what happens with Iowa State. They're going to be tough out, but Iowa State that has not looked great since, they're winning against Kansas State. Kansas State has not looked great at all this season. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes the rest of the way, as Texas Tech clearly is that number 1 team in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I misspoke a little bit earlier. Texas Tech actually had about 311 yards passing in that game, but it was interesting because, Baron Morton, the senior, had a rough game to start things off with, and was just not doing what needed to be done there. Through 2 interceptions, replaced by Will Hammond, the freshman, and Hammond throws 2 touchdowns and had a really, really good fourth quarter. That was really, it felt like a big momentum shift in favor of Texas Tech. So I agree with you. I mean, I think ultimately when you look at Texas Tech, they're one of those teams everybody's a little bit skeptical about, much like Indiana, because of the brand name or lack thereof, because of the history. But when you look at the Big 12 at this point, you've got 4 ranked teams: Iowa State, Texas Tech, BYU, and TCU. You've got a couple other teams hunting around right now, but Arizona State's already got a loss. Kansas State's already got a loss. Texas Tech, as they move forward, it's not the most daunting of schedules. They're at Houston, Kansas at home, at Arizona State. They got BYU at home. When I look at that schedule, I'm like, they could easily go undefeated against that schedule. And I think that sets up something the Big 12 desperately needs, which is the chance at getting a second playoff team. And the fact that they don't play Iowa State really does, I think, maybe bode about as well as you possibly could have for the conference, given that last week or 2 weeks ago, we were like, are they going to get even one legitimate at-large playoff contender? Right. Now they might have 2.
Right, and you're right. The schedule lines up really well for them. I mean, they have a tricky trip to Arizona State, who was obviously in the playoff last year, and Kansas State.
Who knows?
We thought it was going to be a tricky game, but maybe it will, maybe down the road here. But you're right. This schedule lines up with Oklahoma State, Kansas at home. I mean, you're right. At minimum, they're going to get 10 wins at this point, the way it looks. And if you look at Iowa State, like you said, they don't play. The other one to be tricky about here is TCU. They just beat SMU yesterday, which is a really big win for them. But they go to Arizona State this weekend, which is not going to get any attention based on the Week 5 schedule. But that's a big game, because if they can win that game, they'll be 2-0. No, sorry. SMU's not in the conference. They'll be 1-0 in the conference, and that's a good. I mean, then they go Colorado, Kansas State. So
it does extend the ownership of the ACC by the Big 12. That's been one of the interesting things. If you get with TCU beating North Carolina in week 1, it's the same kind of thing. A couple other games of note: Michigan 30, Nebraska 27, and that's a game. I still don't know what to make of Michigan, because when you look at the post-game win expectancy, Nebraska had I think a higher post-game win expectancy. It's or a higher net success rate, whatever it was. But it was another game where Nebraska didn't pull off a win against a ranked opponent, and another game where Michigan doesn't look that convincing offensively, but they're able to win. I mean, it really puts Michigan in a really good spot moving forward. Because when you look at what they've managed to do now and the position that they find themselves in, you look down their schedule and they have to go to USC, which frankly looks winnable, given that I don't really trust USC at this point. The only other ranked team they play is Ohio State at home, who they've owned the last few years. And frankly, the rest of their schedule doesn't add up to a whole lot. They kind of got lucky with everything.
Yeah, I wonder if Michigan's going to have the same conversation Indiana had last year with this, how it's playing out right now. But I doubt it.
Something tells me they're not going to hold the Wolverines to the same standard, Matt.
I will say this. I know Bryce Underwood only had 105 yards passing, but this is a win they needed. And for Underwood, he's played 2 road games at Oklahoma and at Nebraska, 2 very tough places to play. He went 1-1, and if you're looking down the road, Underwood, he looks like he has the skill set. He's gonna get better. I saw this stat. They had 4 yards of 30 yards, or 4 runs of 30 yards or more. I mean, so they were just running all over Nebraska, and Nebraska gave up 200 yards against Cincinnati rushing earlier in the season. So we should have probably saw this coming, that Michigan likes to run the ball. It's probably going to continue. So maybe Nebraska has more issues than we thought. One to note, and I'm not really sure they should bring back Sharon Moore. They are now 8-0 with interim head coaches in the last 3 years. So
wasn't Sharon Moore one of those interim coaches?
Yeah, but it's still an interim coach, right? So
I like the idea, like it's like who's holding the conch, right? Like you're head coaching job around in the room. I like that a lot. That's good.
Yeah, but go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was gonna say it really is incredible. But you're right, Michigan. Coming off of last year, it seems like they finally got their footing back. Maybe, and as our topic here, they're right in the mix now because of the way the schedule breaks for them. They could be in the mix for a Big Ten championship appearance. That seems, more a likely scenario. Not a championship, because I just don't think they're on the next level. But certainly they're in the mix now for maybe a playoff spot.
More so than Nebraska. Now, Nebraska fans, if you're listening, your schedule is actually pretty easy for the most part the rest of the way. There's only 2 ranked teams on the schedule the rest of the way. You got USC at home. Again, winnable game if you are actually a good team.
Yeah.
And at Penn State, which, as far as ranked games go, isn't the worst thing in the world to have, given how Penn State has looked offensively so far. But this is a game Nebraska really couldn't afford to lose reputationally with their fans, but they did. How do they bounce back from it is something I'm really curious about. And it's interesting how many people after that game were like, I'm out on Dylan Raiola now. Like, we've ridden this ride. It's not happening. I think that might be premature, but I also understand the skepticism, given that these are the kinds of games you should be winning at this stage in your career as Dylan Raiola. You got to find a way to pull that one off, and he was not able to.
Yeah, I mean, was it 29 straight ranked losses? Was that the stat?
Going back to 2016, I think. Yes.
That's just an unbelievable stat. They couldn't run into one at this point. They have to win one of these games. Maybe when they play Maryland in a couple weeks, maybe that will be a ranked game. But they really need to just get over that hump, and until they do so, it's really hard to take Nebraska seriously from a national standpoint or a playoff standpoint.
Yeah. Oklahoma 24, Auburn 17. Bit of controversy here, as Oklahoma, after the fact, was found to have been given a touchdown that shouldn't have counted because of a fake substitution thing that happened. This was also one of those games that SEC fans have talked themselves into loving these games because of how defensively oriented they are. I think the teams were a combined 6 for 27 on third down. Neither team, I think, exceeded 300 total yards of offense. Auburn actually controlled time of possession, but Oklahoma picks up another big win at home. I mean, Oklahoma has won a lot of the games that they lost last year, which has put them back in contention. Auburn, somewhat predictably, has lost some of these games. But Oklahoma, this is the weird thing. Like, they could not afford to lose this game given what their schedule looks like moving forward. Are they an actual contender, I guess, would be my question for you, Matt.
Yep. It sets up, they had to win this game to do that. So now that sets up well for them. Their defense, they might have their front four is fantastic. I think they ended up with 10 sacks against Auburn. That's a lot of sacks for any team, and they have the right quarterback. Mateers, I think, is really good. They won the 2 big games in the early part of their schedule, which we said they would have to do to make this relevant. Now they have a tough Kent State team coming in here in a couple of weeks, but certainly Red River in a couple of weeks is really looking a lot juicier than probably a lot of people thought, especially where Texas has been so far this season, what we think of Texas and how people are perceiving Texas. I'm really starting to like the Sooners team a lot more than I did preseason. I think we talked a little bit about this. They've been impressive in the trenches. It's not surprising that defensively they're doing it with who their head coach is, Brent Venables, a defensive mind. Now, is it enough offense to win some of these games? They're going to have to win because they still have to play Texas, like we just said. They have Ole Miss at home, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. I mean, that's a murderer's road on the stretch. But if you can win 3 of those and you're a 9-3 team, they may be that 9-3 team because they're going to end up having 5 ranked wins.
Only other game I wanted to really mention in this round before we jump to the main topic of conversation is Miami beats Florida 26-7. Good win for Miami. They add to their repertoire. Can we stop considering Florida to be a good team? Like, I think the most annoying part of the Sunday coverage was the sunshine pumping of Florida that I was listening to. I was like, oh, well, they look like close on offense. And it's like, can we please stop this? Florida's 1-3 on the season. Their one win was against Long Island. They haven't really shown a pulse offensively in any of these games. I don't know how good of a win this is for Miami, but it's certainly not. I mean, this is a Florida team that I still think 1-11 is a possibility as they move through the rest of the season.
It's not good in Gainesville.
I mean, DJ Lagway only threw for 61 more yards than you did on Saturday.
Yeah, I know. And he had a great end of the season last year. So I am not sure. I am not sure what happened. But to score 16, 10, and 7, and now, don't get me wrong, LSU and Miami have superb defenses. That's certainly.
I don't know if Miami has a superb defense, but it's at least decent. Yes,
LSU is probably superb. They're very, very good. Wow. But to score 16 against South Florida, 10 and then 7, the defense is doing their job. But it seems like, unfortunately, this is going to end. 1-11, you're right, is possible. Who are they beating? Mississippi State, maybe. I don't know.
Looks risky so far this year.
I know. I'm just trying to see where it would be. I don't know. You're right. I mean, and I don't know what the answer is. Is it firing the coach now? They got to figure out what they want to do. But this is going to end. This is not going to end well. For Florida, especially for a team that finished so strong last year. And I think we both thought they weren't going to be a playoff team, but be better than this. Be more competent. They are unwatchable.
Yeah, it's real bad. And it's just like gumming up guesses again, where it's like they played a tough defensive game. It's like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, you can gum up a game pretty easily when you have elite athletes. If you're not actually doing anything in the game other than that, it's not really that entertaining as far as I'm concerned.
61 passing yards. I mean, it's
nuts.
That's Navy-like. I mean, it's a little bit better than Navy, I guess, but
I mean, it's not that much better than Navy.
And they're on the triple option.
Correct. Yes. Anyway, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Big Ten looking deep. But before we do that, let's talk about Wisconsin and Clemson. First, let's talk Clemson. Okay. Clemson loses again. They lose at home this time to a Syracuse team that lost their quarterback in the second half. And Clemson was already so far behind that they couldn't come back. And this Clemson team, much like Florida, just looks adrift. Now, Clemson actually did perform okay statistically in that game. But the problem is that they've lost 3 games now. They're not only out of the playoff picture, they're out of the ACC picture, I would argue, with the way that they're playing. I don't see some radical resurrection of this. Dabo's not getting fired. That buyout is too extreme. Nor should he necessarily get fired. I think a lot of that's been premature, but this does not look like a team that is well in any way, shape, or form. And it just, as much as people were convinced they were going to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country, this is one of the more shocking starts to the season I feel like we've seen in the last couple of decades.
It's baffling for a team that, I mean, I think I had them in the Final Four this year, which is, I think was fair based on what was coming back, based on Klubnik. We looked great last year, or late, at least the second half of the year. And then, the LSU loss, like, okay, 17-10 at home. LSU's really good. But then even the Troy game, like they were losing that game 16-0 in the second half, or 16-7 in the second half. I mean, there's a real scenario where they're 0-4. And so something is just not clicking. It's not a talent thing. I mean, talent, they've been stacking recruiting classes. Something's just off. And old friend Tom Allen's the defensive coordinator. He has not looked very good. He didn't look very good this last week, giving up 34 to Syracuse. This is nothing against Syracuse. Syracuse has been a lot better under Fran. I don't know what his last name, but a lot. Fran Brown, he's been a lot better. This is a problem, and it's the schedule does lighten up. I mean, North Carolina, Boston College, then SMU, who's not looking as good as last year. But the back half, I mean, that there's a real path to 5-7 or worse with the back half of that November schedule. So, to answer your question, this is a really unwinnable hand, and if they don't figure it out soon, these things, when they start to go sideways quickly, you see what's happening in Stillwater very quickly. Not saying it's going to get to that level, but certainly it's really hard to turn the ship back around if they don't figure this out quickly.
Yeah, I mean, right now in FPI, Clemson's dropped to 44th. They dropped 14 spots this week. They are projected at 5. Well, they're roughly projected at 6-6 right now. But if you look at the efficiencies, which I always find fascinating because it really does give you a breakdown of like how teams are actually playing, and it takes out a lot of the previous year's worth of stuff, because most of these, like S&P Plus, which I'll talk about in a second, that still factors in last year because it's trying to factor like relative program prestige. In raw efficiency numbers, Clemson is 71st in the country. Like Rutgers is a spot ahead of them. UConn is 2 spots ahead of them. They have the 88th ranked offense in the country this year. They have the 48th ranked defense. They have the 97th ranked special teams. This is Clemson we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. And like you said, this is not a talent disparity. All this stuff about, well, Dabo's not going in the transfer portal. The amount of talent that still comes through the doors there is sufficient. There is clearly something like fundamentally broken in the management. And it's not just Tom Allen. It's the same thing with the offensive coordinator who, there's been a lot of complaints about as well. And it's just like, it's weird to have a contender like this just off the table before the end of September, but that's exactly what's happened. And what's fascinating about it is right now, the ACC is pinning all of its hopes on Miami and Florida State. And I don't actually think either of those teams is that good. I think Florida State is still getting a lot more credit than they probably deserve for that win against Alabama in terms of extrapolating to the rest of the season. And that, not to take anything away from the win, but just statistically speaking, when you look at Florida State, they're still projected to go 9-3 on the season. And that's probably where they'll land. They'll land at 9-3 or 8-4. And that's a perfectly good season for a team that went 1-11 last year. But it's really just completely, it's like it pulled the Jenga block out of the ACC, and it feels like the whole thing, except for Miami, has collapsed. And what does Miami do every year?
They lose a game that they shouldn't lose. And even the darling of last year, SMU 2-2, they've struggled a little bit. They're 2-2, and they're probably out of it, even though none of them are conference losses. So they're still in the mix. But this has been the problem with the ACC. They're out of conference has just been really bad. And so this game, again, another game that's going to get overlooked next week, is that as Florida State goes to Virginia, Virginia's been offensively very good. It'd be interesting to see how Virginia does in this game, how they match up with Florida State. And again, I'm not saying they're going to win, but this is certainly a game that maybe no one had penciled in, but maybe it's a tricky spot for Florida State before that Miami game in 2 weeks, next weekend.
Let's talk about Wisconsin, who's in a whole different type of problem because, like, Clemson, it feels like if they make a coordinator change on the offensive side and they bring in some new, like there's still a lot of brand juice with Clemson that they can go off of. Wisconsin, I mean, this is like watching a program bleed out in real time over these last couple of years. And I don't know that anybody would have predicted that with Luke Fickell, with his track record of success at Cincinnati. They looked absolutely listless. They get booed off the field at home versus Maryland, of all teams. And you talked before the season about how tough their schedule was. It didn't get any easier because the Big Ten got deeper, it felt like, as we went along. Like that's another one of those where I don't think they can afford to fire Luke Fickell, but I don't see where they're going as a program right now.
Find me the win
Right.
on their schedule. Iowa at home, maybe because it's a rock fight. At Minnesota to close the season. I
think they might be able to catch Washington napping, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, they go at Michigan, Iowa at home, Ohio State at home, at Oregon, Washington at home, at Indiana, Illinois at home, and at Minnesota. That's
they drew the short stick this year.
that'll put some hair on your chest, which they don't need in Wisconsin right now. So, but I'm fundamentally shocked at, and this is one of those things where we got so used to Wisconsin being so good for so long because of Barry Alvarez. There was a time when Wisconsin was actually statistically worse than Indiana in the 70s and 80s as a football program. But from that, from like 92 until really COVID, it just felt like Wisconsin being good was their birthright in the Big Ten. And they did it a different way than Ohio State and Maryland or Michigan and Penn State. And it just feels like the magic's run out. They tried to modernize. That didn't work. They've tried to go back to their old identity. That's not working. And right now, it's like, I don't know what the allure is for a recruit to go. Indiana's got like one of their best guys that they've brought on this year was a tight end that was at Wisconsin for 3 years and chose to come to Indiana. That's emblematic as anything else of the problems that you see up there right now.
Yeah. I'll never forget when I first moved here when this would have been 2013 when both Penn State and Ohio State were both ineligible for the Big Ten championship, and IU was 3-5, but they were in position to play for the Big Ten, whatever leaders or whatever they were at that time. And Wisconsin came in and ran for like 600 yards or whatever it was that day. And that was who they were for the longest time, as you said. And to watch it just fall apart, they fired Paul Chryst, who I didn't think he was doing that poor of a job, but they, like you said, they wanted to modernize. They bring in Fickell, who was the hot name. Fickell was supposed to go to Notre Dame, right, at the time. And so so Fickell ends up in Madison. And I think, if we're revisionist history, I thought, okay, that's great. I'm sure you thought the same thing. Okay, Wisconsin's just going to keep it rolling. And it has just been 3 years of a slog. And there's not a win on this schedule. There isn't. And if they win one, that's okay, fine. But that's a 3-9 Wisconsin team. I don't know when the last time that's happened, but in a non-COVID, I don't know what their COVID record was, but it's probably been 3 decades since then. So certainly they may have to fire him, but you're right. I don't know where the money comes from. They may have there, but I don't think you can go into next year with this particular coach. And I'm saying that based on what I think is going to happen, not based on what's happening right now, because there's obviously a chance of turning it around, but it seems unlikely.
You made me look that game up. It was 2012. Wisconsin won 62-14 over Indiana. They rushed for a school record 564 yards. Wisconsin's quarterback threw 7 passes and only completed 4 of them, and they won 62-14. I left at halftime.
I was there. I couldn't. I knew it was a lot of yards, but I said 600, so I guess I was close.
You were close. You remember that a lot better than you thought you did, man. But no, it's fascinating to watch, and it's. You see this is one of those things, and I keep saying this with college football. Everything is so coach driven, and nothing is for certain that's going to last forever. And that's where, Dabo and Clemson can definitely turn things around, but he's got to figure out how to turn it around because you get the wrong coach who doesn't figure it out, and then your program starts to spiral, and it's real hard to pull it out of that spiral. And if I'm Wisconsin, or if I'm other teams in the Big Ten, like Iowa's a great example. Kirk Ferentz is like dropping hints. This may be his last year in that broadcast this weekend when they're playing Rutgers. I mean, Iowa could just as easily go the direction that Wisconsin's going right now, because once you lose that cultural center, and we've seen it the other way. We've seen what Indiana's done under Curt Cignetti so far after having such a lack of success and a lack of coordinated focus, I guess, for lack of for a long time. You got to think about that as you move through things. So.
Oh, and good. And I was just say, and you think it's and there's probably some modernization behind this, right? Or they switched to Madison because they wanted to be more modern offense. Iowa's got to make that switch, and I know we're not going to talk about it much, but this Gundy at Oklahoma State, never modernized, and unfortunately, he is, after losing this week against Tulsa, he's probably going to be sooner or later. Either there's going to be a retirement or something, but he'll be on his way out too.
It's a different era. And if you're not on the right side of the era and you don't know what you're doing, it's a real problem. Speaking of problems, the polls continue to rear their ugly head as we went through this in detail on Crimson Cast, but just, we've seen this debate now and it hasn't gone away for the last few weeks. Not really a debate. It's kind of become a consensus outside of media circles that there's a real problem with the way the polls are trying to handle teams and where to put them. And, so Indiana's a great example of this, but you've seen some other examples as well. I think actually Texas Tech falls into this category also, where both teams were either underranked or not ranked to start the season. Here's teams in week 4 pulling off big wins against highly regarded opponents. And Indiana ends up 11th in the AP poll, and Texas Tech ends up 12th in the AP poll, behind teams that don't have as good of a win or the quantity of wins. Penn State probably being the best example. Is Penn State has 5 first-place votes, and their best win on the season is against
I don't know.
Nevada, maybe. FIU, maybe. But because they haven't lost, there's this attitude that, they haven't done anything to lose their place, except the place was given to them based upon
preordained.
It's preordained. And you have wild variations. Brett McMurphy released his ballot before the games were over on Saturday night. And he has Notre Dame 15th, despite them only having a win over Purdue in which they gave up 30 points at home. It just feels like the whole system needs a hard reset. It feels like there needs to be maybe an extra day given to vote so you can actually research what went on rather than having to make a snap judgment. Because it's not about criticizing writers and media people. Because, yes, it's hard to go cover a game and then try to vote when you haven't seen the rest of the games. But then why are we asking people to vote if they haven't had a chance to look at what they're voting for? That just seems it seems not good.
This is a very backwards, back then I'm sure it worked great when you had a poll system, but surely that was also a problem because you're right. If you didn't lose, if you lost early, it was great, right? If you lost late, your season was over, you could win the national championship. Ross Dellinger talked about this too when he was a voter. He's like, I had my ballot in by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you're at the Indiana game and you're writing your story, like you said, and you finish it at 2 a.m., you have no chance you have no idea what happened in their games. You're just looking at a final score and saying, yep, Texas Tech is moving up a little bit. Oklahoma looked pretty good. Penn State, I'm not moving them, but they didn't play. They're still good. So, there's no reason not to move this time back. We are in an internet age where you can literally take a QR code and say, here's my ballot for after reviewing all the games. That would be a better system because otherwise the AP is going to run into this. And this is same. The coaches' ballot's the same thing. That's also a joke because half the coaches don't even look at that. They don't not even the real voters, right? We know this. But so if you really want to make this worthwhile, make it due Monday at 8. And you know what's really cool about this day and age? You can literally input it and you can get the results within seconds. You don't have to wait for someone to actually tabulate it and actually look at what the actual results are. It can just pop up. So this idea that we need to have it in at whatever time in the morning on Saturday or on Sunday, I'd rather actually get a really good idea of what the voters think and actually say, okay, that voter really believes in, we'll just use Texas Tech, for example. He had him number 7. Okay, I can justify why they're number 7. They went on the road, won by 24 points. That makes sense. But just to say, Indiana, they won, but I can't move them past this team because they didn't play and they were undefeated or we were here. That doesn't work anymore. That idea needs to go by the wayside if we're really going to take these polls seriously. The polls are supposed to be fun too. And if this makes it not fun to actually have a conversation, when you have some voters like Brett McMurphy submitting his ballot before USC even finished the second quarter or whatever time it was, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's and my other complaint about this is, and you hit the nail on the head. 40 years ago, when you didn't have the internet, you didn't have other than Sager, and you didn't have power ratings, there wasn't. Right. You really didn't know. You had to have some kind of a consensus. There is so much good material now to tell us who the good teams are, who they're playing, what those results were, and everything just seems vibes based, which just doesn't work. I mean, like that's not a good. The idea that these things don't matter, which is I've heard a lot. Like the only thing that matters is what the CFP votes, and it's like, have you noticed how closely aligned CFP vote and the AP poll tend to be? That's narrative as much as anything else. That's the establishment of narrative. That's why this stuff does matter. And look, if the AP is like, we can't do this anymore because we don't want to get in the middle of it, which they kind of did if you go back to the BCS era, where they're like, we don't want our poll included in the BCS.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a conversation the AP needs to have, or switch up what you're doing. Make your voters take the time to really look at everything and then justify afterwards. I think might be a better way of going about it. We took plenty of time to do our merit poll. We're going to pop that up on screen now. Like I said, closer than we thought it would be. So both of us have Georgia number 1 and Oklahoma number 2. I'm assuming in both cases, at least my rationale here was, well, Georgia has the best win of the season, that win at Tennessee. And then Oklahoma has 2 really good wins against Power 4 teams at home. Michigan, who they pretty much dominated in that game, I thought. They were the superior team. And then they win against Auburn, which is a game against another ranked opponent. We diverge a little, although as it turns out, our top 8, or I think our top 9 is essentially the same, but in a different order. Matt, you had Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Florida State, Miami, Oregon, and then Ole Miss. I had Miami 3rd, Ohio State 4th, Ole Miss 5th, Indiana 6th, A&M 7th, Oregon 8th, Michigan 9th. What was your rationale for the order you put them in?
So I actually moved Georgia up to, after going back and forth last week, I actually moved Georgia back to 1. I just think they have the best, like I said, have the best win in the country, and we'll learn a lot more about them this week, but that obviously not taking that into a factor. Oklahoma is certainly they're probably the one team that has 2 really good Power 4 wins, both at home, but certainly beating Michigan and beating, I'm drawing a blank who the other team was. Whoever the other team they beat was. They have 2 Power 4 wins.
Auburn and Michigan. Yes.
Oh yeah, this week. Yeah, Auburn and Michigan. Man, Ohio State still has that. Still has Texas. They didn't play this week, but I still think that's a valuable win. So I still rank Texas because of that win. And then Indiana to me has the second best win, and all those teams right behind them. A&M has a good win at Notre Dame. Florida State still has that Alabama win, which I ranked Alabama pretty high this one. And Miami, I dropped them this week because Clemson just looks like not the same team, even though they beat Florida. I dropped them a little bit because Florida is also a dumpster fire. Kept Oregon at the same spot. And Ole Miss, slowly, with the Tulane win, they have 3 really good wins now. And then on Tennessee at 10, I think they have one of the best loss probably in the country at this point. But that's where my top 10 really shook out. And LSU, I dropped a lot because of the Clemson game.
Yeah, I can't bring myself to really reward Tennessee for a loss that much, but I understand the perspective of where you're coming from on that. You didn't have USC at all, which I thought was interesting. And I'll admit USC for me, it was, the fact they've won 2 conference games now, and their offense has looked maybe the best offense in the country statistically. It's like them or Oregon at this point. Was why I had them where I had them. I had Michigan pretty high because I really do value the win that they had at Nebraska, and the fact that Nebraska, I think, is 20th in S&P Plus this week. That resonated with me. I thought they played okay at Oklahoma. The statistics didn't necessarily showcase that, but given that they haven't had their coach, maybe that's a positive as opposed to a negative, as you pointed out earlier. But the fact that they're winning with defense and running the ball, and they've got now a win on the road against the top 20 team, that stuck out for me a bit. I also moved Memphis up. I think Memphis maybe at this point the leader in the clubhouse for the G5 spot. Yeah. We talked about USF. USF losing to Miami isn't a killer, but Memphis beating Arkansas at home, that's going to carry a lot of weight, I think, as we move forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, this is where the bottom. I had USC probably at 21. I had them right there. I decided on Texas over USC. I guess, honestly, when I went back and forth, because USC has not really played the top of the Big Ten. Texas played Ohio State close. I could have went either way on that one, and then I had Memphis at 22. So I had Memphis, Memphis. I had Memphis right there. So, we're not going to talk about this today, but the American looks really good this year. It's gonna be a really fun race.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how all those conference matchups play out. Real quick, we only got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about the matchups this weekend, and there's a ton of them.
It's a gauntlet this week.
It's a gauntlet. I mean, LSU at Ole Miss. If you're LSU suspicious, which I would count myself in that category, this will tell us a ton about where they're at in the mix. You got obviously Alabama, Georgia. That's one of the night games. That's on ABC. I'm assuming Georgia's going to win this game, but a lot of people seem to think Alabama's the better team right now. And I'll say from a power rankings perspective, Alabama is coming in as the better team, at least statistically. And then, of course, Oregon, Penn State is another huge game. And again, it's like, what happens in that one? Is Penn State actually better than what they've shown so far? Or is Oregon a juggernaut and Penn State's going to really struggle with them? It's a night game. It's a whiteout game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a ton going on with that one that's going to be really fascinating.
So both of these are about $400 again. Which one are you picking to go to if you were going to spend $400 to go to one of these games?
I would love to see an Alabama Georgia game in person. I would probably opt for that one. And I think the level of play, though, I think in both of these games is going to be pretty high. But I feel more confident in Alabama, Georgia, both teams playing well, than I do in Oregon, Penn State, because I'm a little suspicious of Penn State. We've talked about that already.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a really good game. We'll see where both those teams stand in the Big Ten. It's a big game for Oregon, traveling across the country. The whiteout is not a joke. It's probably one of the best atmospheres, if not the best game that you can go to. I've never been, but certainly that entire atmosphere is pretty wild. As you said, people are on Alabama because Georgia Kirby has still struggled to beat them. He's only won one time. It happened to be for national championship, but he struggled. So Alabama continues to get the benefit of the doubt until Georgia actually does it. Now this one's in Athens. I don't think they've played in Athens in quite some time. So I think that's certainly an advantage for Georgia. And they haven't lost, I think, in now 5 or 6 years at Georgia. So that's certainly a big game. I'm curious how that goes, but those are really big games for both conferences. It will definitely help our polls next week to really kind of start see that, to actually level themselves out and really see where teams stand.
Yeah, there's a couple other games of note that I think are really fascinating. Indiana at Iowa. We talked about how does Indiana put the Illinois win behind them and go and win in a place that has really been a struggle for them to win at. And Iowa looked pretty good against Rutgers. It made me question how good Rutgers is, especially defensively, given that Iowa just kind of rolled through them and Iowa had some problems offensively all season. USC at Illinois, exact inverse with Illinois. How do they bounce back from that embarrassment?
Big noon too.
Big noon. And is USC actually good? I mean, they've beaten up on lesser competition, including in the conference. Michigan State stuck with them to a degree that I don't think anybody was expecting necessarily, but they still won pretty handily because they outscored them. Notre Dame at Arkansas. That's another one where it's like, well, we're going to really find out at this point if Notre Dame's defense is okay, because Arkansas can put points up. They can't do a lot else, but they can put points up. And then the last one I'll mention quickly that I think is really interesting and a little under the radar, Tennessee at Mississippi State. We think Tennessee's good. We're not sure Mississippi State's good at all, but man, if Mississippi State, circles the wagons and wins this game, it completely throws my conception of the SEC off for the rest of the season.
That just give us more cowbell. That would be really interesting to see if they actually can pull that off. But yeah, Tennessee coming off the Georgia game a couple weeks ago. Be interested to see how they took the time to look at that. They obviously played really well. They should have probably won the game, but certainly that would be interesting to see if they can pull this off. One you missed was LSU at Ole Miss, and this could be if Ole Miss wins that one, that'd be 4 really good wins to start the year and really puts them in a position for the playoff, better than anybody else this early in the season.
Yeah, no, and I kind of mentioned them off the top, and it's
that's right, yeah.
But what's interesting about Ole Miss is if they can win that game, they've got moving forward. They're at Georgia and at Oklahoma, but the 3 other games they've got in the SEC are South Carolina, Florida, and Mississippi State, and that's. If you can get through the schedule 6-2 in the SEC this year, you could get into the SEC title game.
Yeah, no, you're right, and they're going to position themselves really well because they'll also be 3-0 already. Like I said, they'll have the 5 wins, be one of the first teams to have 5, and they'll have 4 really good ones, and no one else would have that at this point. So Lane is maybe finally putting it together, but he has to go beat LSU.
Yeah. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for us here on Football Weather. Another fun episode. A lot to talk about next week. And this is when the rubber really hits the road in college football. This is when it really gets fun. You got stuff going on all over the country. We're looking forward to chatting with you folks about it throughout the course of the season. Hit us up on YouTube. Hit us up on Spotify and Apple. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. For Matt Blaszka, I'm Galen Clavio. So long, everybody.